Welcome back, everybody, to the 214-215 podcast. I'm Zekrom.
And I'm salty.
The NFL free agency period started a little under 2 weeks ago. A period that saw the Cowboys and Eagles make several moves, including losing players, signing players, and making some trades. What do we think of the moves made by our respective franchises? Well, let's dive into it. Salty would like to start us off with the Eagles.
IG, bro. So the Eagles didn't do that much in free agency. Considering they'll have a large amount of cap space. And also because we have some pretty big free like rookies we're gonna need to give contracts to in the upcoming future with Jalen Carter, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and we gave one of those players. We didn't give one of those players, but we gave players similar to them contract also with Jordan Davis, who got a 3-year extension worth $78 million. I personally think that is a bit of an overpay for him for what he's shown so far. Over $20 million a year. He has he had 4.5 sacks last season. He did improve massively as a run defender last season, but this flashes of like him being a good to great pass rusher still haven't really been there yet. Like you see him like one like a rep or two, but it's not really consistent yet. And he has 8 sacks total in four seasons. And yes, like 2022 he didn't play that much, plus he was injured. Same with the other 2 seasons, but like it's pretty indicative that like through 4 seasons of his career so far, he hasn't really done much as a pass rusher. And like defensive tackles take some time to develop and everything, so that can take some time. But I don't know. Unless he develops further as a pass rusher, I feel like this is kind of an overpay of a contract for a player that hasn't really done much as a pass rusher yet. But going to the other moves that we made this season, the big quotation marks signing we made this offseason so far was getting Tariq Woolen on a $12 million contract for 1 year that can go up to $15 million. This is a pretty exciting signing, like upside wise, because Tariq Woolen has at times shown incredible flashes as a cornerback, where he's played as like one of the best in the league. Like some advanced stats have him like pretty high up there, coverage like metric wise. But the downside is that he got benched a few times in Seattle for character concerns and like personality issues, and sometimes he can be like a little up or down in coverage. Like he has some issues tackling, which showed up more in these last 2 seasons, because his rookie season, like if you go by missed tackle rate, he was around like 3% something, and these last 2 seasons he was around 20%. So like a pretty drastic jump. So maybe there's something there that can be fixed by Vic Fangio and the rest of the defensive staff. And then like there's also there again, like I mentioned with the personality issues, there's like that one situation in the NFC Championship game between the Seahawks and the Rams where he had that great rep against Puka Nakua. He's like completely blankets him, which shows like his incredible coverage ability at times. But then he like gets the taunting penalty, and immediately following after that gives up a touchdown. Because like sometimes there can be that up and down, but if the Eagles can get their best out of him, this could be one of the best, if not the best, Eagles cornerback trio of all time with Tariq Woolen, Cooper DeJean, and Quinion Mitchell. And like Adoree Jackson wasn't that bad last season, right? He wasn't like the reason we were not a good team last season, but just the the increase in level of play we could possibly get from Tariq Woolen is very, very exciting. Another cornerback we signed was Jonathan Jones. He's probably just a depth signing. He used to be on the Patriots, I think, like quite a few years ago. I don't know what other team he's been on since then, but I remember he was a rookie on the Patriots. He's has some inside outside versatility from for slot and outside. So probably just a depth signing there. Same with Arnold Abikati, edge rusher, probably just a third edge rusher, if not like fourth. He had 6 sacks in 2023 and 2024, but saw some reduced snaps in 2025 and only had 2 sacks. So probably just like a depth as a edge rusher, nothing that exciting. We signed Marquise Brown also to be our, I assume, third wide receiver. He was on the Chiefs last season, caught 49 passes for 587 yards and 5 touchdowns. Brings some speed to the position, but hasn't always been the most consistent wide receiver. So for a wide receiver 3, that's perfectly fine. And then finally, the big signing one everyone has been looking forward to, hoping that the Eagles would make. We got Johnny Munt signing with the Eagles. Great fucking tight end who, hopefully brings some competency of run blocking on the Eagles. Because that was a very, very, very big issue on them last season with Grant Calcaterra, who they did resign to just a 1 year deal, like near the minimum. So probably just going to be fighting for his job at training camp and everything. But then also Dallas Goddard, who we did resign, which was pretty big. Got him on a 1 year, $7 million contract, which is kind of surprisingly low for him. I thought he was gonna get a lot more on the free agency market, but I guess it just never materialized. We were running kind of a Ponzi scheme with his red zone touchdowns this whole season, but I still thought that he would get more on the free agency market than he did. But it was pretty big for the Eagles because it also helped them push back a $20 million cap hit that we would have gotten if he had left in free agency. So that was very helpful.
Something else I thought that was interesting about that Dallas Goedert situation. Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans got a $12 million contract for 1 year. So I thought it was pretty interesting how, I mean, I would consider Dallas Goedert to be a better player than Dalton Schultz. So maybe it's just a situation where he wanted to come back to Philly that badly.
I think so, but like it's also like he took a pay cut last season immediately after we won the Super Bowl. And we basically were like, we gave him permission to like seek out a trade and everything, and he just came, and you like couldn't find a market, and everything came back and took a pay cut. So I don't know, like if that situation, I'd be like, let me come back for like a tiny contract back to the Eagles. If there like really wasn't, if there was like an actual market out there, I don't know if he would have done that. I don't know if he really cares about saving the Eagles $20 million in cap hit from him leaving. But yeah,
Yeah.
that could definitely be a possibility. But like the thing is with all these tight ends that the Eagles had last season was none of them were good run blockers. Dallas Goedert used to be an incredible run blocker for and pass blocker for his position, but last season he just really wasn't good, and Grant Calcaterra is like one of, if not the worst run blockers. So Johnny Munt signing is actually pretty good for run blocking purposes at the tight end position, which is something that the Eagles do need because last season at least, maybe it'll become completely different with Sean Mannion. We ran a lot of two tight end sets, and it was very glaringly bad how terrible our tight ends were at run blocking, where they'd ask Grant Calcaterra to like pull from the other side to like do a block, and he just completely whiff, and it just like ruined the entire play. So having a competent run blocking tight end is actually very useful. Sean McVay once called him the best third tight end in the NFL. So, hopefully can bring that to the Eagles and finally get us some good run blocking at that position again.
The Eagles were just one Johnny Munt from making the Super Bowl last season.
Exactly. You can't tell me we wouldn't have like repeated if we didn't have Johnny Munt, again. Some other
He would have
tiny
helped them beat
oh
the Chiefs
yeah, exactly.
the first
Exactly.
time around.
Exactly. It's just a real shame we didn't have him, but now we do. Dynasty starts now. That's what many are saying. Some other tiny additions we made was or re-signings we made was we re-signed Braden Mann, our punter, to a 4-year deal worth $14 million with $7 million guaranteed. I didn't think we were gonna give Braden Mann that long of a contract or like even re-sign him at all because that's something the Eagles have done the last few times with their punters. But he's been pretty good for the last 2 seasons that we've had him, so good to have him back, I guess. We also renegotiated Michael Carter's contract, the cornerback we traded for from the Jets last season. He didn't really play much, another depth cornerback, but I was thinking he was probably going to get cut because his contract was worth over $10 million, and that's just way too much for a backup cornerback. But got his contract renegotiated, cut down his salary, and he could actually be at play for safety for us in 2026 because I'll get to that in a later section. We lost Reed Blankenship, and then our other two safeties we have are Andrew McCoubum, who was a rookie last season, got injured, and then Sidney Brown, who has not been good at all in the limited times that he's played. So he could possibly be at play there for safety and training camp and everything if we don't invest in the safety position in the draft. Because at this point in free agency, the safety markets are completely gone. There's not really that many great options there anymore. And plus, I don't think the Eagles would really be looking to spend that much money there, considering. Well, I'll get to it at a later point. And we also traded for Andy Dalton. We traded a 2027 seventh round pick to the Panthers for him. Right now, he'd be slated to be the quarterback 3 behind obviously Jalen Hurts and Tanner McKee. I don't think the Eagles would make this trade unless they are gonna obviously trade McKee. So I'm interested, like if that comes in within the upcoming days. I'm gonna like we wouldn't trade him for like a day 3 pick or later. So I'm gonna assume it'd be like a third or a fourth if we would trade him. So maybe something will come of that, or if not, maybe not. Like at the end of the day, it's a 2027 seventh round pick. I don't think the Eagles are like going to be crying about that if they cut Andy Dalton later in training camp or whatever, just because he's getting paid like a decent amount. So I don't think they'd just keep him as QB3 flat out. But that's pretty much everything on the Eagles additions and re-signings so far this offseason. So take it over to Zekrom with the Cowboys free agency additions and re-signings.
Yeah, before I get into that, I just gotta say, they can afford to cut their best quarterback during training camp. I mean, Andy Dalton just brings something the Eagles just have not had since, Donovan McNabb. Um, anyway,
Which is what? What
anyway,
what does it, what does Andy Dalton bring that we haven't had since Donovan McNabb?
just basic good quarterback play. Who even is the quarterback for the Eagles now? Isn't it like Carson Wentz?
No, it's Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl MVP. Um, been to the Super Bowl
Never
twice
heard of
as
him.
many times as Dak Prescott. Been to the NFC Championship game twice as many times as Dak Prescott.
Actually, two is not two times more than zero. You
Oh,
can't.
oh,
Uh,
that's so
nothing's
true.
two times more than.
Oh, that's
So
so true.
checkmate, dummy,
That's
checkmate.
so
No, we've
true.
never
My
we
bad.
Dak Prescott's never made it, buddy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, um, all right. So the Cowboys had were all the reports going into free agency was that the Dallas Cowboys were going to have the most active free agency in since the 90s or something like that. While that is technically true, I do think that they missed out on a lot of spots. First of all, I want to talk about things we did internally. First of all, the biggest question mark going into the offseason was what are we going to do with George Pickens? Were we going to sign him to a large extension? Where would we franchise tag him? Would we decide to trade him for some reason? We went the franchise tag route. According to reports, ever since putting on that franchise tag, there have been zero contract negotiations, just another Jerry Jones contract negotiation masterclass. Obviously, I want George Pickens still in Dallas. I think him and CeeDee Lamb with Dak Prescott is just something you just cannot give up, even if you have to pay two wide receivers $30+ million a year. I think that's something you just gotta accept just because how just those three players, what they give, the ceiling that they give the offense. We restructured a couple players. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith were both pretty obvious restructures going into the season. One thing I did find pretty surprising is that we restructured Malik Hooker. It only saved us about 2 million a year, and Malik Hooker was someone I thought was for sure getting cut. I think it would have saved us about 8 million or 6 million a year. But Malik Hooker is a decent player. It's hard to judge a player who was under Matt Eberflus the past couple seasons. He's been one of our more consistent defenders. So I don't hate keeping him, but I was kind of surprised about it. We also restructured Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark was another person I thought that we would restructure. We had three $20 million defensive tackles in the room, and that's not the best way to build a roster. Kenny Clark, you could have caught him and got $20 million of salary cap space without any penalty. We decided to restructure him and save about 8 million. We did address that bloated tackle room, but I will get into that later when I talk about losses. Another thing I was surprised we redid the Terrence Steele contract. Terrence Steele was someone I thought was absolutely getting cut ever since signing his contract in 2023 offseason, I believe, which was coming off an ACL tear, so that was kind of a dumb move on our part. But he got around $18 million a year, and he definitely did not play like an $18 million a year tackle. And if we June 1st cut him this season, we would have saved like what 12 million on the salary cap. What we did instead was we basically just redid his entire contract. So he goes from earning $18 million a year to $11 million per year, which I think is more than fair for him. He is still a decent right tackle. It also makes it so that we don't have to spend draft capital on offensive linemen, which we've done a lot of in the last few seasons. I think, it's a benefit for both parties. Terrence Steele continues to earn millions and has long-term security, while the Cowboys have to really address their offensive line that much. We also re-signed running back Javonte Williams to a 3-year, $24 million contract. I think that's a fine sign. Javonte Williams was really good last season, and $8 million a year. I don't think it's even top 10 in running back salaries. Next, we re-signed Sam Williams. Sam Williams is really talented, but he's kind of a head case. He takes a lot of unnecessary penalties. He has shown that he can make impact plays. Last season, he had a blocked punt. He forced a fumble on Saquon Barkley in our 21-0 comeback over the Eagles. Just had to throw that in there real quick. But uh, he is a talented player. He's going to be under his fourth defensive coordinator in the past 4 years. You know, I mean, when you look at what else we could have signed for that price, I don't hate the contract. Maybe under a new defensive coordinator, he'll have a better production. Maybe he can be a real rotational piece. But at the end of the day, right now, he's just kind of a depth signing. The first significant move of free agency that we made was a trade, which was trading for the Packers for Sean Gary for a 2027 fourth round pick. Gary was expected to be released by the Packers going into the season. He had a cap hit of like what 20 million, and the Packers, especially for his production, and since the Packers were kind of strapped for salary cap space, it was kind of a move that a lot of people saw coming. Instead, they deal him to Dallas for a fourth round pick. Because this is a 2027 fourth round pick, I'm not really that concerned about it. A lot of people were talking about how we traded a fourth round pick for someone who was going to get cut when we could just sign him in free agency. But let's be honest, guys, if Rashawn Gary made it to free agency and it was an open market competition, the Cowboys were not coming out with Rashawn Gary. Rashawn, I do think that Rashawn Gary is an upgrade over our current room, which right now features Donovan Ezaraku, who had a up and down rookie season, Sam Williams, and then a bunch of other depth players. I do think he helps that room. I don't think he's a real big needle mover. In the first 7 games, he has 7.5 sacks, which is really good. And then he didn't have any sacks for the final 10 games, and he didn't have any sack in their one playoff defeat. Overall, I think that I like the move just so it gets like a good player in that edge room. But is it a needle mover? No. Going into free agency, we made our biggest signing since Brandon Carr back in I think 2012 or 2013 when we signed Cardinal safety Jalen Thompson to a 3-year, $12 million contract. We needed safety help, and Thompson is very versatile. He can play a lot. He can play deep safety. He can play nickel. He can play someone in the box. He does a lot of good things, and that's the play that Christian Parker wants for his secondary. He also was familiar with our current DB's coach, Ryan Smith, who worked with the Cardinals. I think this is a great signing. It's an upgrade in our room. It is an upgrade in our room. Another player we signed was cornerback Kobe Durant from the Rams. He started, I think, almost every game for the Rams last season. He mainly played outside, but he has prior history of playing in the slot. He had a pretty decent year last season. Some people's opinions of him might be pretty low because he kind of did get fried in the playoffs, notably. The Cole Kmet Hail Mary in the divisional round versus the Bears was on Kobe Durant. But Kobe Durant, I think, is an upgrade over what we had in the room. Right now, the only players that our players right now in that room are Siobhan Revel, who had a not that great of a rookie year coming off an ACL injury. Deron Bland, who has just was just pretty bad last year, let's just be honest, especially considering his $90 million contract that he just signed. Reddy Stewart, who was honestly not that bad in the nickel, and Josh Butler, who didn't play a single game last season. So I do think that that is a great signing for that room. It was a really cheap signing too, only $5 million for 1 year. Next, signed Broncos safety PJ Locke. Locke was a pretty consistent rotational player for the Broncos last season. He made a lot of good plays in the divisional round versus the Bills. He got an interception off of Josh Allen, which helped steal back momentum for the Bills when it kind of looked like the Bills were going to come back in that game. Were going to like turn the tide in that game, I should say. All of these moves that I do think that with Thompson, with Locke, with Durant, our secondary is much improved from last season. It's definitely not one of the best in this league. With like no question, it's not one of the best in the league, but it's better than we had last year. When I liked all of these signings, and that yeah, I like those signings. We also signed some depth pieces. We signed Chargers defensive tackle Atito Bania. I think I mispronounced that totally, but he's a decent run defender. One thing about him though is that he had a bit of an injury history. I think backing up Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams, I think it's a good depth piece to have, especially if he can stay healthy. Plugging holes in the middle. We also signed, like the Eagles made a huge addition to the quarterback room. We also made a huge addition to our quarterback room, signing Sam Howell, who will be competing with Joe Milton for that third quarterback, for the backup quarterback position. And we also signed depth offensive lineman Matt Hennessy. He provides just, he's just depth lineman. Now we also made several tenders on players. One of them was Brandon Aubrey. Now the Brandon Aubrey situation is really kind of stupid if you really think about it. He wants $10 million a year, which for a kicker, I mean that's just you just can't give that to a kicker. That's just not good asset management, especially when you're considering what the market is for kickers. Kaimi Fairbairn of the Texans just signed a contract for just under 7 million a year, which made him the highest paid kicker in the league. I just don't think that you can give Brandon Aubrey that contract for what 10 million a year. I would have been okay giving him 7 million a year. You could have pushed me to 8 million a year because he wants to reset it, and considering how good I think that you could argue that he deserves it. But asking for $10 million is just too much for me. I do think that this contract will get. I do hope that this contract will get resolved because I think that eventually he'll realize that there's just no way that anyone is going to pay a kicker 10 million a year. And if by any chance some team does, we get a second round pick because we place a second round tender on him. So I really don't think that this is a situation like worth worrying about per se. But it's just a really confusing and kind of dumb situation. We also placed a second round tender on depth offensive lineman TJ Bass. He signed that tender, so TJ Bass could probably be a starter on a lot of teams. So the fact that we're getting him as a backup for this season is really valuable. And that is for what we have for the additions. Salty, would you like to talk about the Eagles and their losses?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the big one was Jalen Phillips, who signed with the Panthers on a 4-year deal worth $120 million. I wanted the Eagles to re-sign Jalen Phillips, but that was a massive overpay in my eyes for Jalen Phillips, and I'm very glad that the Eagles had to walk away price that was lower than that because I was thinking he'd get like 20 million, and that was a lot, but I would have been okay with the Eagles paying him that. But for 30 million, we'll take the third round comp pick and be okay. The other big one was Nakobe Dean, who signed with the Raiders on a 3-year deal worth $36 million. I thought that was kind of low for Dean. I know he's had injury concerns, and he had the injury in the Packers game during the playoffs in 2024, but he has been a top 10, top 5 linebacker whenever he's been on the field the last 2 seasons. He was even better this season than he was last year once he came back from his injury. And I think that's a really good deal for the Raiders. Again, the Eagles were just never going to re sign him because we drafted Jahad Campbell in the first round last season, and you don't spend a first round pick on Jahad Campbell if you're just going to re-sign the Kobe Dean and have him play behind him on others for multiple seasons. So he was just always gone. The player that I'm surprised that we didn't re-sign for as low as they got of a deal in free agency was Reed Blankenship. He got a 3-year, $24.75 million deal with the Texans. I don't think Reed is like the greatest safety in the world. He's like slightly above average. He's like multiple times been like the weak link in the Eagles secondary where like he's often been targeted in main coverage. I know we blew out the Commanders in the NFC Championship, but like Zach Ertz was like demolishing him in single coverage throughout a lot of that game. But still, with it's still better to have him than to like not then have that gaping hole at safety we now have because Andrew Makuba was decent when he played. He got injured, but then we have like a gaping hole at the other safety spot where you very much don't want Sidney Brown to be your day one starting safety there when the season starts. And are you gonna commit like a second or third round pick to that position a second year in a row after drafting Andrew Makuba next season? Because $8 million is not a prohibitive amount of money. Like that's a pretty cheap contract. So for the Eagles to not have re-signed him means they really did not value him all that much. They thought they can replace his production relatively easily if they're letting him walk at that contract number. Because I don't think like Reed Blankenship like is like, oh, I gotta leave the Eagles. Like I don't like if the Eagles offered that contract, I'm like pretty sure he would have just chosen to stay here. He was, yeah, like again, like he's been an average safety. Kind of surprising to let him walk, but again, I guess we'll see what the Eagles do at that position. The only other like really worth free agent that they lost worth any mention is Jahan Dotson, who got a 2-year deal worth $50 million with the Falcons, which is really surprising for how very little Jahan Dotson's done for the Eagles, did for the Eagles once we traded for him from the Commanders. But all of those signings should the ones that I mentioned should all also factor for the comp picks for next season. I believe it would be a 7th round pick for Reed Blankenship, a 6th round pick for Jahan Dotson, and a 3rd round pick for Jalen Phillips. We would also get a 6th round pick from Nakobe Dean, but since we signed Tariq Woolen to a 1-year, $12 million contract, that they cancel out each other. So we're likely going to get those three. There's not really anyone else worth mentioning. Matt Pryor signed with the Cardinals, but he's a backup lineman. Same with Brett Toth, who signed with the 49ers. Sam Howell signed with the Cowboys. Probably just a camp quarterback, I would assume. Josh Ushi and Azeez Ojulari, who we both signed as like flyer edge rushers last season. Neither of them really had much of an impact, which I'm surprised by. Like Josh Ushi was decent. Azeez Ojulari was not good at all, but Josh Ushi was decent, but he got like lost in the depth chart once he traded for Jalen Phillips, and also Brandon Graham came out of retirement. But Josh Uchi signing with the Dolphins. Zizo Jalari signed with the Falcons, and then AJ Dillon, who was our third string running back, um, even fourth string actually, with Will Shipley and Tank Bixby both being ahead of him. He signed with the Panthers. Oh, one thing that I did forget to mention was Landon Dickerson got his contract adjusted. It was originally a 3-year deal, and now it's just a 2-year deal with his pay being reduced a little bit. That's pretty major because it indicates that there's probably a really big possibility that Landon Dickerson might retire after the season if things just don't go well for him on the injury front this season, because he mentioned that he had like a miserable time this season. He's like dealt with a lot of injuries, like even going all the way back to college was that was the big reason he fell to us in the second round when we drafted him in 2022, was that he had two ACL tears, a pair of ankle injuries like already in college, and it's just like it was like how long is he going to be able to survive in the NFL? And he was great for the first few years of his career, but this last year you could just tell that like the injuries caught up to him in some shape or form because he just looked like a shell of himself. Same with Cam Jurgens, who I had back surgery, I'm pretty sure, and they just both look like shells of themselves. This past season, both of them went to South America to get stem cell like treatment, so like maybe that'll help them and like put them back on track. But with Landon Dickerson, especially with that contract adjustment, it's not looking the best for him, like playing for much longer for the Eagles, but hoping for the best with him and that he's like able to recover from all these terrible injuries that he's had to pile up on him. Well, I'll let Zekrom also go over the losses that the Cowboys had in free agency.
So the Cowboys on the free agency front, the Cowboys really didn't lose anyone that significant. As far as I'm aware, only like two players that were roster last season signed elsewhere, which if you which most of our free agents were on the defensive side of the ball, and who would want defenders from the Cowboys? Like, let's just be honest. Wide receiver Jalen Tolbert went to the Dolphins. Tolbert was a third round pick, and I think 2022. There was a lot of hype around him when he first came to the team in 2022. People were hoping he would kind of be another Michael Gallup type receiver, but it ended up not. He ended up just being kind of just like a depth player who was good for maybe one amazing catch like every like what 3 or 4 games. He was a wide receiver 2 in 2024. He got that job snatched by George Pickens, obviously, and then throughout the 2025 season, Ryan Flanoy pretty easily showed that he was better than Jalen Tolbert and took over that wide receiver 3 spot. Jalen Tolbert is not someone I'm going to miss particularly. Wanye Thomas, a safety, went to the Colts. Thomas really did not get to play that much in his time here. He was a undrafted player. I felt that maybe if he got more opportunities here, he could have shown that he was potentially a pretty good or decent player. He goes over to the Colts, where I think that hopefully he'll get an opportunity to shine. That does it for this free agency losses. On the trade front, we actually made two trades, which dumped some players. One of the biggest one was Osa Digizua, who's San Francisco 49ers. In the 2025 offseason, we signed Osa Digizua to a 4-year, $80 million deal. I wasn't in love with the contract at the time, but when he played with Micah Parsons, he was good. So I kind of figured that we'd have Micah Parsons and then Osa Digizua, who's kind of a Micah Parsons merchant, but still at Micah Parsons. Obviously, we traded Micah Parsons, and throughout the first like half of the season, Osa Digizua was pretty much invisible. When we got Quentin Williams from the Jets, Osa or Digizua, he his play noticeably improved. But like I mentioned in my section about additions and internal moves, it just does not make sense to have three $20 million defensive tackles. I thought Kenny Clark would be the odd man out, but apparently both Odigizua and I'm assuming Christian Parker had concerns about his fit in the scheme that Christian Parker is bringing to the Cowboys. So they decided to offload him to the 49ers for a third round pick. I would have wanted a second round pick. I feel like some team would probably give a second round pick for Osa Digizua. He's under contract for 3 more seasons. But that third round pick gives us a day two pick, which we did not have. I'm not in love with the move. I don't super hate the move. It's not. I don't think it's a move I would have made. I think personally, I think I would have just gotten rid of Kenny Clark, but it is what it is. We also traded another defensive tackle, Solomon Thomas, to the Titans. We got, I think, around $4 or $6 million in cap savings for. It was a 7-for-7 swap. So traded Solomon Thomas and the seventh to the Titans for their seventh. So we moved up like what, like eight or I think I forget it was 8 or 16, but we moved up just we basically traded Solomon Thomas to move up in the seventh round. Which I was pretty shocked by. Solomon Thomas had some good moments in Dallas last season. I would have thought he would have been a great depth piece to have, but I guess it's sort of a similar situation to Odigizua, where Thomas just did not fit in Christian Parker's plans for the Cowboys. And that's pretty much it for significant Cowboys losses. Going to my overall thoughts about the offseason as a whole, I think the secondary is much improved just by having, I think, actual NFL players in both the safety room and the cornerback room. I think that if you can draft a cornerback, we won't talk about draft this podcast. That'll be a later podcast. Spoilers, but there's another podcast coming. I know you guys are excited. But I do think that if you add a first round quarterback to the room, I think that room can be pretty decent next season. The linebacker situation is super disappointing. We were in on the Kobe Dean, and apparently we offered the Kobe Dean a similar, if not higher, contract than the Raiders. But ultimately, the Kobe Dean decided to sign with the Raiders because Quay Walker, another linebacker, also went there. So you can almost forgive them for not getting the Kobe Dean. What you cannot forgive them for is not going after guys like Quincy Williams or Leo Chanel or Devin Lloyd. These are guys that would have massively helped your room. Right now, you have one player who you honestly don't even have any sure things in that linebacker room. Because while I do think DeMarvion Overshown is really good, he has had two very significant knee injuries. And while both of them were kind of freak act or kind of freak injuries, you should not be relying on someone who has an injury history like that. It would have made a lot more sense to just sign one of these guys. You let pretty much this was one of the deepest linebacker classes in years probably, and you didn't get a single one. I mean, it's just a really questionable process. Seems like they were just so focused on the Kobe Dean, and then they just didn't have a backup plan afterwards. But I mean, I guess that they're trying to address that in the draft. Again, I think the Cowboys too often are relying on the draft to fill in holes in the roster. They did do a pretty decent job this offseason of filling holes in secondary, but that front seven or at least the linebacker core is still really questionable. I do think that the defense will be a lot better. It's hard to get worse than it was last season. I think that with the moves that we did make and assuming this is a big assumption, but assuming that you hit on your two first round picks, which by any by for there's no reason our two first round picks should be anything but defense. But assuming that you hit on those two first round picks and just having a better scheme of Christian Parker instead of Matt Eberflus, I think there is a possibility. I think that this can be like a top 16 unit, just like I think if you have an average defense, considering how good your offense should be, I think you should easily make the playoffs. I do think that this feels like a situation where because you did not address linebackers and you didn't really get some really great edge rushers. I mean, Rashawn Gary's like okay, but because you didn't address the front seven enough, I feel like that's something that if you make the playoffs, that'll be something that you're going to be looking back on like, oh, we if we had a better players in the front seven, we would have maybe made a deeper run. Additional moves I hope we can make. Um, I do think that bringing back Jadeveon Clowney, who had a really good back half of the season, I think he's still currently unsigned. It'd be really awkward for me if he was signed already. But I don't think he is, and I think that he would be a decent ad. I think you're a base or like in nickel, where you have a defensive line of Gary, Quinn Williams, Kenny Clark, and Jadeveon Clowney. I think that's a good enough defensive line that'll get you through most games. And the last thing I want us to do in free agency, just sign any linebacker. I don't care who at this point. Not Kenneth Murray, not Kenneth Murray, but any other linebacker. Just sign. Just Shaq Thompson. Shaq Thompson's not a game breaker, but he had some good coverage stats last season. Sign him. This anybody would do. Anybody would do. Let's go back to Salty to talk about their overall thoughts about free agency.
You don't want Nathan Gary? He was great for us a few years ago, Zekrom. I don't know if you remember him.
Who?
Nathan Gary?
I guess, man.
Have,
I mean, it's somebody. It's somebody. It's it's a
have I never
player.
shown you that one screenshot of Nathan Gary? Here, I'll put it up on screen when I find it, but not when I find it. When I'm editing, but here it is, Zekrom, for you. Look at this clip. This is from 2021. Not this clip. This image. You want him?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, hey, it's a body. It's
that
a human being. You know,
that's so
he has
true.
two legs. He has two legs. He has two arms. He could put on the shoulder pads.
Uh-huh.
He can look, maybe not look in the right way, but he clearly has eyes. He's looking at something, you know. So I
That's
mean, yeah,
true.
I think
Yeah.
that could be that's not bad. You know, could be
Mhm.
addition to that could be an upgrade over our
Yeah.
current room.
All right.
But bottom line, sign anybody.
That's
Take
fair.
it away, Salty.
All right. Well, overall, I thought it was pretty good free agency for like what I expected us to do. I'm over the moon with the Tariq Woolen signing just because of the possible upside we could get from that. Um, a little bit negative on the Jordan Davis extension, but I trust Howie Roseman at this point. He's got all the benefit of the doubt at this point for anything he does. So we'll see how that plays out. And the rest is just like that's just how things I expected things to. I'm also happy we re-signed Dallas Goedert because he's one of my favorite Eagles, and I thought that this last season was his last season, and I'm glad we have him back at least for one more year. But yeah, like for the amount of money we had, the players we have coming up that are gonna get extensions, it made sense we weren't gonna do much in free agency. We got some good comp picks for next season with Jalen Phillips getting that massive extension, that massive contract from the Panthers, and not extension. So I'm pretty happy with it overall. Excited to see what we do in the draft. Well, I'm gonna assume we're gonna draft O lineman and safety help and everything else, but I'll give my predictions and like mock draft of that all in the future pod we're gonna do. But yeah, two other tiny signings we made that I forgot to mention all the way back in the addition section was Damian Pierce and tight end Stone Smart. Stone Smart probably just a camp body, just to see what we can get out of him. Damian Pierce is like a tiny bit interesting just because he was good his rookie season on the Texans and then just massively fell off after that. So it'll be interesting if like Maybe you get a little juice out of him. Um, but other than that, I'm pretty okay with the Eagles offseason. Did about what we expected us to do. I'm excited for the draft.
All right. I think that's it from both of us. Unless Salty, you want to talk about anything? How do you think the Phillies are going to do this season?
I think we're gonna do about the same. I think we're gonna do good in the regular season. And in the postseason, it just comes down to can our bats do literally anything. Um, our pitching rotation isn't going to be as good as last season because we lost Suarez, but hopefully Andrew Painter is decent filling in for that. Very happy that we got Jesus Luzardo extended. Very fun pitcher to watch. Same with Sanchez. Hopefully, Nola can carry some of his WBC production over to the Philly season, because he was awful last year, to say the least. And yeah, you know,
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't expect you to actually talk about it. Anyway, um, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the 214-215 podcast. Stay tuned. I think maybe next week, maybe next couple of days after this, we will be doing a draft podcast where we do a mock draft, talk about what we want to see in April. But again, thank you guys all for watching. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, share with all your friends if you liked what you're hearing, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
bye bye.